Maura, I haven't seen you in forever.
I'm stalking you, just stalking you, Rick. I'm gonna show up everywhere you are.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Jeannie. This is Martha Creek, and you can contact me, marthacreek.com, and it has my phone number and email and a way to enroll in about anything that I'm up to that's going on there. That's a way to do that also. The call is being recorded so we can offer it up to other people that are not here tonight and to keep it going out into the world to fulfill through our co-conspiracy to get empowered teachings to the whole of the planet. So that's the purpose of what's going on here. At any time you don't want to be recorded and you want to share, ask a question, or speak, just ask me to stop the recording, and that's exactly what I'll do, and then we'll proceed from there. So anybody, before we launch into this commentary, see if there's anything on your heart or mind about your learning to see as mystics see, what you're noticing, what you're practicing. If some aspect of the mind's got you tripped up or bound up in some way, you feel stuck in some way, speak that also. So the floor is open here before I launch into this, if you want to get something out in the air. Chris, go ahead.
It's really good stuff. I love this book. It's very deep. I tried the gazing at God as God gazes at me, and then trying that with another person. I was on a phone conversation with somebody who said something, it was just awful what he said. And I'm like, don't say anything, don't react. You know, gaze at the sky like God would gaze at him. And the next day I had a conversation with him and he was very nice and pleasant. And I'm like, wow, well, maybe this does work. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome from my part, Chris, and thank you for testing it out. Just thank you for giving it a fair test. Like, I'm just going to see what's possible here. And then you have your own direct experience, which moves it from theory or crazy Creek woman, blah, 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 to I have a direct experience of this. So it's something beyond a theory now. And Godspeed as you continue down that path, my friend. Yeah. Welcome, everybody. Janice. Can you unmute, Janice?
There, I had an experience this week where I normally perhaps would not have contacted this person. I was hearing the story in my head that I'd heard from someone else. And I contacted this person, not believing the story in my head. And that worked out really well. So I was okay to contact the person. And I spoke it initially with, hi, Stuart, I'm calling. I would love some clarity. I was real happy instead of staying with the story.
Me too, friend.
Yeah.
Me too. And you know, it reminds me of, even though that's not the course we're in, but the Buddhist practices and how meaningful they were to me years ago, and still tonight as I hear this again, that's described what you're describing, Janice, as the path of right speech. So right speech. So our principles would say, whatever I'm saying to another person, whatever I'm holding about another person, I'm also holding as myself. So I can't flip somebody off without flipping me off. So I can't hold something against another person without holding something against me. And then, so to have the clarity of mind to say, I want to start this with my reason for calling is, and it's like getting my heart right and putting my heart in front, which is basic, crucial conversations training that I want to lead with my heart. So whatever I'm going to say will be said after I establish a heart space. And then you saying, I'm seeking clarity. And it could be something like, I've not rested well since we got boogered up at that meeting the other night. for example. So I want to go back and iron that out or reconcile that or something. So this is exactly according to the teaching and exactly according to what we're learning here, some of us in this invitation of seeing how the mystics see. Thank you. Thank you for sharing it and for living it, for being it out in the world. Okay, so let's look then at concepts. Thank you, Francis. So I open with a reading each week. So here's the one for tonight. And thank you, Francis, for putting it forth. God's love is so ingenious, so ingenious, and victorious. God's love is so victorious, so ingenious, that I find God is willing to turn the world around to get me facing in the right direction. Now, when you hear that, does that free you or frighten you? That something has to occur, divine intervention, something has to occur sometimes to get me facing in the right direction, to get me, for example, looking within again instead of looking without, to get me to go to source instead of to what I've made my source. One built on sand, one built on rock. So just notice, it's like, oh, because for some of us, the notions of God as a punishing something, as a, I got some lessons to teach you and it's for your own good, can be very frightening to think about. What part of my world is God going to turn around to get me facing in the right direction? So get a sense of what it would be like to be that surrendered, that free, that faithful, that trusting, that mystical, to see, should that happen, as that happens, whatever happens, I accept it as exactly what was for me. Not what I preferred, might be a very, very scary. And that there's something that knows more than me. That there's an intelligence higher than my own. What would that be like to live that out? To back up, to take a step back from the circumstance, from the situation, from the clinging, from the demanding, from the willfulness, from the rigidity, from the stubbornness. And yes. And yes. And yes, even if my knees are shaking, even if my hands are trembling, and I'm seeing purposefully a much broader picture, what's behind the senses, what's beyond the senses, what's beyond the science, what's beyond the physicality, what's behind the emotionality, what's beyond what I've known up until now. So if you can find comfort in that, be comforted in that. And if not, stay tuned. We'll see if we can find some as we go along here. So this is what I picked to read, so I'll use that tonight too. Surely God does not exist so that we can think correctly about God. Amazingly and wonderfully, God desires instead the flourishing of what God created and the flourishing of what not only God created, but what God loves. You. The flourishing of you. The flourishing of me. The flourishing of what God created. And then ironically, we flourish from learning from our mistakes. We flourish by learning from our mistakes. We flourish by learning from our mistakes and changing that which doesn't work for us, changing that to a more aligned course. A course that's truer. If most religious practices, if your religious practice is nothing more than to remain sincerely open to the ongoing challenges of life, the ongoing challenges of life, the ongoing challenges of love, if we do nothing more than that, this is from page 96, we will find God. You will find God. I will find God if I do nothing more in my spiritual and religious practice, but to remain sincerely open to the ongoing challenges of life and love. If I'm in devotion, if I'm spending time with my face turned right, with my face turned in the right direction, that of seeking communion with Source, that of alignment, that of atonement, that of what is breathing me, then I'm going to find it. Keeping the heart space and the mind space open, sometimes even in what seems like hellish kind of situations, is the essential work of spirituality, to keep our heart and mind open to that. He quotes one of the cardinals as saying, to be human is to change. To be perfect is to have changed many, many times. And we say, oh yes, I want to change. It's like, all but this. Don't change that. Oh no, not that, not that. I don't mean that. Oh no, don't change that. Great people, leaders, mystics, keep adjusting to what life offers and what life demands. We keep adjusting based on what life offers and life demands. You might think that change would mean losing your sense of order, or that you risk making mistakes. Even that's okay, because the deadening alternative is so much worse. God's so totally into change. Have you noticed? God is so totally into change. And if God doesn't work for you, use life, universe, source, whatever you can do to get around the semantics. God's totally into change. And I know this every time I see how divine grace maneuvers around my errors. It maneuvers around my shortcomings. It maneuvers around my humanness. Maneuvers around my sinfulness. And remember sin being defined as I didn't remember. I didn't remember who I am. And how the entire universe itself is continually changing states, from solid to liquids to gases to emptiness, naturally. So change is God's clear pattern. And we can be afraid of it or align with it. So let's talk then. This notion that from polarity thinking, good and bad, right and wrong, to prayer, and from moving out of that polarity to a life of prayer, to a living prayer, and the topic of prayer, even in what prayer means to you. So this is scripture. We must teach not in the way philosophy is taught, but in the way that Spirit teaches. Spiritual things must be taught spiritually. So relative to prayer, the Spirit comes to help us in our weakness. See if you can find a direct experience of that. So nobody's selling you on a God, on a source, on prayer, on the potency of prayer. So just see if you can put all that aside and see what is your direct experience that the Spirit has come to you. The Spirit has been there with you, for you, to help you in a time of weakness. What is your direct experience of that? What was your glimpse that you're not alone? That something was there for you. That there was a presence there for you, even when you might have been feeling lonely or alone or weak or despaired in some way. That something happened. A reminder. And I know this next section may offend some of you, or I'm prepared for that. I don't know that. I can't know that. But it's a counter to this notion that you have to pray a certain way. I do not believe that. I do not practice that. It is not my reality. So if that is your way, that is your reality, you're free to keep it. I'm not asking you to believe anything. This is offered out of a spirit of expansion and what's possible beyond what I already think and believe that I know. So look at what prayer means to you and see if you can answer these questions. If you've got a note, maybe write it down on the notes or put it in the chat if you're comfortable using that. I pray because. I pray because. How would you respond to that? The purpose of prayer is blank. The purpose of prayer is blank. From Romans, when we cannot choose words in order to pray properly, the Spirit herself expresses that plea in a way that could never be put into words. So see if you can repeat this if you're willing to. When I cannot choose words, when I cannot choose words in order to pray, the Spirit itself expresses that plea. The Spirit itself expresses that plea in a way that could never be put into words. So it's an invitation to use words if you have them. And if you don't have words, then let it be. That the prayer of your heart doesn't require words. And what if prayer is more of a resonance? So what's the consequences on your prayer life? What's the consequences on your practices of prayer if you continue to believe there's a right and wrong way to do it? When you believe there's a right or wrong way to pray, what's the consequence on your prayer life? And for those of you who have shared, it's like the consequence will be that I won't do it as much. I'll try to get it right. I won't do it till I'm in a different frame of mind. I won't do it if I'm feeling afraid or shamed or guilty. I won't do it till I can get my thoughts together. I'll do it with motive. That I won't be as likely for offering an opening the circuit of divine gaze. So it's impeding, it's an impediment, an impeding notion that I can't just hold resonance as prayer, that no words are required. Yes, as Rick says, and then I wait and wait and wait. I wait to feel better. I wait to be coherent. I wait for words. I wait for another book to come out to teach me how to pray. Instead of offering up whatever words I have. And when words aren't there, something bigger than me knows. So no words required. Get a sense of that. that after tonight, the word prayer is more alive for you. It's less deadened, less pious. And that I have, and you can have a new mental attitude about this, a new spiritual attitude about this, a new emotional attitude about this notion of prayer. So it's like in the writing, he puts it akin to like that of a tuning fork. A tuning fork. So all you and me, all we can really ever do in this spiritual life, in these spiritual practices, is to pause and get tuned. To get tuned, attuned, atoned, and to receive the gift of this, the calm that this would bring, this opening, this preparedness to receive that has nothing to do with words, it has nothing to do with worthiness, it has nothing to do with our status and titles, what group we belong to, but something inner, present, and broadcasting. So if prayer is indeed the way to make contact with source, with God, with ultimate reality, and it is no longer an attempt to change God's mind about us or events, how would it look? How would your prayer look? If it's a way to make, it's a way to get attuned, and it's no longer an attempt to change God's mind, direct God, and instead, prayer is much more about changing my mind, changing our mind, so that things like the mystery and infinity and eternity and renunciation and forgiveness and grace and providence can resound, can come alive, resound in us. What if it's allowing our higher self to be more in the driver's seat? That it's a chance for the higher self to hold more assertion, to hold more direction, to hold more authority than our smaller self. And this is Richard Rohr's invitation, and I like it. So this is the change, that we shift out of, I prayed today, to prayer happened, and I was actually there. Instead of, I prayed today, prayer happened, and I was there. being guided, being loved, being used, and less in the delusion that I'm in a driver's seat. Less and less in the delusion that I'm in control. All right, big deep breath. Comments, questions, anything here you want to put in the field regarding a shift of prayer, the prayer paradigm? It's something much more interior. Anything about that? Rick, go ahead.
So when you were talking, it's for me the difference between taking a breath and breathing all day and being breathed. And for me, often it comes as a dance, a sense of dancing. Sometimes I lead, sometimes I don't. Just moving with it, easy, easier than breath. And the more I abandon myself to that notion, the more fun it is. And then it comes in a barking dog and my unruly 3-year-old grandnephew who's throwing himself about the house. That's prayer too. All of it, all of life. The great exchange of life, I think, for me. And it's changing all the time.
I've heard that before. And again tonight. Thank you, honey. Yeah. So what's the consequence or the implication or the possibility of this then? That if I'm going to have a new prayer life, I'm going to have a new practice of prayer. So after tonight, I no longer think I know what prayer is. I'm going to discover what it is. And see what happens. Yeah. So while we're at it then, let's look at this notion of God, this paradigm of God. And you know how many times we've said, and I think at least all the faith traditions I can call to mind have said, if you think you understand God, then it is not God. If you think you understand God, then that is not God. If you think you know what God is, you don't yet. So what if it became a direction for our life, not a destination, not a tick box exercise? So I'm in discovery of that, to find places. And I remember a teacher asking me once, if God wanted everyone to know God, what would God be? So if God wanted every human being to know God, what would God be? What's your answer? Don't try to give a right one. God wanted everybody to know it, to know it. What would it be? And then Unity New Thought says, what about it? God's always, God's infinite, God's everywhere, God's everything, God's omnipresent, omnipotent, omnipotent, omniscient, omniscient. So what do you actually believe? That God's in that situation, not in that situation? God saved that one, God didn't save that one. God cares more about that one, cares less about that one. So what if what we claim we believe, we actually did? That it's always and beyond, it's everywhere and beyond. It has no beginning and no end, Alpha and Omega, all that is, it is. In Luke chapter 17, it says, we long to see, but we do not see. We long to see, but we do not see. And maybe worse than a spiritual blindness, we often apply criticism for spiritual blindness to others. It sounds like they're out of principle. They're not in principle. It's like, well, when I say somebody else is out of principle, who's out of principle? Me again. When I say somebody's out of integrity, who's out of integrity? Me. I don't know a daggum thing about their integrity. Their integrity belongs to them. My integrity is a full-time job. And living in accordance to what I claim to believe or espouse to believe. And so let's just have a little fun with it. So think about, not do you criticize, who do you criticize and how? So it would be like those darn blanks, those darn blanks, those darn neighbors, those darn politicians, those darn others, those darn people who can't be on time, those darn people who won't keep a commitment, those darn people who won't keep their word, those darn people who criticize me while I'm criticizing the criticizer. So then it's an invitation back to the both and. You've heard it many times through this one. The both and. It's now and always. It is here and there. It is everywhere and anywhere. It is beyond any attempt to be controlled. It's beyond any attempt to be bought, sold, or understood. And whatever I'm criticizing is an indicator of what I've not integrated in my own self. So judge ye not Martha. That's as far as most of us go. Judge ye not. It's like, no, judge ye not, least you understand that it's you that you're judging. Judge ye not without understanding that whatever you're judging over there is projected from your own mind. Yikes. I got some sweeping up to do. So what if this notion of oneness? How many times have you used the word oneness in your life? Without saying, I don't believe that all that much. That if tonight's the night or this is the week, to say there is no more superior and inferior. There is no more better than or worse than. What if that's a reality? Not just a theory. There's a joke. Do y'all remember Zig Ziglar? Anybody remember? You'd have to be a certain age. That I followed him, studied him, read him, went to workshops. Power of positive thinking. And he told a joke once about two little boys that was acting up in church. And the minister brought them in after the service to give them a talking to. And he brought them in one by one. So the one little guy went in first. And of course, they were nervous and worried about what was going to happen. And he got in there and the minister said, "Where is God?" Of course, he was panicked and stunned. He couldn't respond. The minister just got louder. "Where is God? Where is God?" And he got so scared, he just jumped up and ran out. And his other little friend was staying there. And he said, "What's happened?" And he said, "God's missing and they think we took him." So God's missing for some of us. And you've heard it many times. If I'm not finding God, who moved? If I'm looking for God, I will find God. You are already the children of God. See if you can say it or affirm it or feel it. I am a child of God. I'm a child of Creator. And I'm equipped. See if you can speak it. I'm equipped. I'm equipped with everything I need to resonate with the divine. I'm a child of God. I'm a child of creation. I'm a child of Creator, and I'm equipped with everything I need for resonance with it. It does not mean that I'm morally perfect. It does not mean I'm psychologically perfect, that I'm emotionally perfect. Not at all. But I now have the freedom to see failings in myself with less hate, less blame, less shame, less guilt, and to grow better, to grow, and to grow better, and to be better. Because of these failings, because of these quote mistakes or errors. We're in a laboratory here. Have you noticed? Trial and error. It's how we learn. And this is a major and important difference. And you may be thinking, like, how could I have gone through my whole life without someone teaching me this? That there will be failings and they're okay. There's shortcomings and it's okay. And it's included. And you'll learn from them. How could such a great truth unknown or forgotten by the world, by people, by even organizations, even by churches. So we're remembering now, awake now, giving birth now, and aware that creation is giving birth to again and again and again, that rebirth is actual. And we'll move into next week's notions around the lost tradition. Any questions, comments here? I want to put you over into a small group tonight and have you just share a little bit about what would be a new way to relate to prayer, or something you're willing to practice in the way of prayer, and what would be a new way to relate to your former paradigm of God as God. So you're not required to do this. If you don't want to do that, you simply don't accept, and I'll be right here. But if you're willing to go over and have a little conversation with a handful of people and see what the wisdom of the group holds, so to speak. And the floor is open now if you want to speak or say anything before I put you over there. These recordings are available, of course, after we get done here too. Okay. Buckle up. And just share, make sure everybody gets a chance to talk, and I'll send you a little message when it's time to come back to the group. What'd you learn? Anybody? What's your takeaway from tonight? Hi, Dottie. Just so you know, honey, the class is ending in 5 minutes. And you can have the recording if you want it.
We would like the recording. We couldn't get in earlier.
Okay, honey.
Okay, thank you.
We're glad you made it. Hi to you and John. Welcome back, everybody. Well, what was that like? You got to meet a saint or two. Yep. Dottie and John made it in. Thank goodness. I just am so excited about the thoughts of y'all knowing each other also. So anything you want to say or share before we close tonight? What's your takeaway from tonight? And if you're writing, write it down. Write it down. What's your takeaway, Carol?
A couple of us said alignment, and I like the idea of prayer being that in a constant, just little shift to allow this energy that another word that was used, or presence, to flow through. It's nice.
Yeah, easier, huh?
Yep.
Me
Well,
too.
or help, that's really quick too.
Yeah. Anybody else? What's your takeaway from tonight? If you're waving your hand, I'm not seeing it, so just keep waving or electronically raise it. Reverend Ron, anything you want to put in here? Wendy, go ahead, honey.
Oh, just to see how divine grace maneuvers around my humanness.
And the group says, amen. Amen.
Just
about
feeling the connection Martha, and feeling wonderful.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Beautiful. You're welcome for my part. Jean Myman, go ahead, honey. Unmute. Unmute, Jeannie.
The group I was in, when we started out, I only knew one face, but in getting with the others and looking at their wonderful faces, and we started sharing, my goodness, was there a beautiful connection. And I just kind of think we kind of melted together a little bit. It was really a nice feeling, just really, really nice. And I want to thank all them and thank all of you. Thank you.
Thank you too, sweetheart. That's like a check, goal met. Okay. God is into change, apparently. So change is God's great pattern. Go with it or suffer. So you remember my stories from a few weeks ago about go with it? That I started this as my primary spiritual practice even before I got back into this material. Go with it. Go with it. And boy, I'm getting many opportunities to apply it. Go with it. And to open to the possibility that God doesn't love us because we're good. God loves us because God's what that is, good. That changes everything. This notion that we've got to be good or can be, must be, have to be, instead of God loves me based on the nature of God, not based on that I'm good. So as that changes me, that can also change you. And that can change the way we are, the way we live. So this conversion then, a conversion is a crucial idea in this mystical seeing. Conversion, for how mystics see that I have a conversion. And to co-inspire, to be further transformed, further converted, knowing that transformed people transform people. Transformed people transform people. So be it. Let us begin. Love to you all. Thank you for taking the time for conversion, transformation. My greatest appreciation for you.
Thank you, dear.
Welcome. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Martha. Blessings, everybody.